As we look ahead at things to come, things dreamed, and things yet to be seen, we stop and say thank you to the one who made it all possible, the one that has brought us out of darkness and into his marvelous light, the one that has been with us each and every step of this amazing journey, and the one who will go before us as we go where he is calling us next. Today we sing and say thank you. Thank you, God, for whom all good things come. Thank you, God, for all you're doing and all that's yet to be done. Thank you, God, for restoring our lives through the gift of your Son. We stand together as your church today to sing, to say thank you to you, God, for your unexplainable love.
Our God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Stronger, God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God.
Then came college. Lance had always and only wanted to be an architect. To me, it seemed he would be in school until he was 42 years old. Expenses soared. Tuition, books, and drawing tools led to the long list of essential expenditures. But of course, just like loving fathers everywhere, I was happy to be able to help him out, and I did all I could to support his growth and his dreams. I never thought of these expenditures as sacrifice. I was his dad and was prepared to give everything possible towards his life and dreams. And then, one day, the unthinkable happened. My son Lance, he died. On a bright, beautiful, and horrible Halloween day, 21-year-old Lance was buried in his church's little country cemetery. That afternoon, I walked away from his grave, and since that day, I have never spent another nickel on Lance. And that's how I learned it. Death is cheap. Death can be sustained without expense. It is living that's costly. It is growing that is expensive. Our dreams, visions, and hopes require resources. Death doesn't. And that's why I'm glad my church needs money. A living, growing, thriving church will always require the continual, consistent, and conscientious financial support of its members. And that's the church I want to belong to.
To live beyond ourselves is to be kingdom-minded rather than earthly-minded. To live beyond ourselves is to desire God's will over our own will. And isn't that really fundamental to the Christian life? Isn't that the way Jesus taught us to do life? Here's the first blank lines you can fill in on those sermon notes I asked you to keep out. And it's this. Living beyond ourselves is first being kingdom-minded. And then living beyond ourselves, it's living with this attitude, God, your will be done. What occupies your mind most often? Upper story or lower story? God's priorities, kingdom priorities, or your priorities? God's will or your will? What is it? It is fundamental to the Christian life. Jesus taught us how to pray, and in his teaching us how to pray, he taught us this idea of being kingdom-minded and wanting God's will more than our own. It's in what's referred to as the Lord's Prayer, a prayer that people mistakenly pray word for word. It wasn't meant to be prayed word for word. It was to be a baseline prayer, a outline for a prayer. And here's how it goes, part of that prayer. Jesus, Matthew chapter 6, verse 9 and 10, he says, pray like this. May your kingdom come soon. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. May your kingdom come, God. May your will be done.
So next morning, in comes the brigade. It was doctors and nurses and residents, and I don't even know who else it was because it was just our little tiny ICU room was filled with people. And our main surgeon sat down, and he was very somber and told us that this type of injury to the pancreas is only happens by blunt force trauma, usually in bar fights, or a kid crashes their bike and the bike handle hits him in the gut. But since none of those could have been Jackson, it must have been abuse. The only way our son would have something like that happen is someone hurt him intentionally.
Part of the follow-up I had with them was to let them know that I'd also had to call the police and children's services. We have to do that by law, and I also recommended to the children's service worker at the time that, based on everything I saw, that Jackson needed to be taken away from his parents. As of that day, I wrote a note in the chart and made the phone calls that there was severe physical abuse that could have been fatal and may actually claim Jackson's life, and that the best thing to do would be to take him from his family.